that started with a conversation I had with Larry Acunto, who is editor of 20th Century Guitar, which was in the summer of 1994. And Larry and I talked about the possibilities of getting guitars into the Smithsonian, what it would take to do so, and also who the really preeminent builders were. And of course, Larry immediately talked about Bob Benedetto. Larry Acunto and Scott Chinery became friends a number of years ago. And early on, Scott, who was the first patron of the American guitar, expressed a desire to see the guitar elevated to what he considered to be the artistic position that it deserved to be in America and in the world. And he thought that perhaps the best way to do that would be to commission the finest possible archtop guitars from the best current makers. And he did so beginning in the summer of 1995, when he asked various guitar makers if they would consider making the best possible guitar. Only one stipulation: it had to be blue. As the guitars started coming in, he realized that this was something that was probably going to be very historic. And eventually, when Bob Benedetto finished his guitar, it was clear that every maker had really done his or her best, and that they all represented different sides of the acoustic archtop equation, and they were all acoustic. The other thing that Scott always felt was that this was something that was going to be destined for a museum. And of course, that's where Scott and I began our work together to get guitars into the Smithsonian. And ultimately, we did have two exhibitions that Scott supported. The first guitar exhibition was called Amplified, Electrified, and Deified, and it was a history of the electric guitar made up of Scott's own collection of electric guitars, and it included a presentation by Bob Benedetto on guitar making, which was the first time that an actual guitar maker had ever presented anything at the Smithsonian. That was in the fall of 1996. The following year, in the fall of 1997, we did, in fact, unveil the blue guitars. And I know that Scott's favorite of the blue guitars was Bob Benedetto's blue, which was called Cremona Azzurra. And it today still stands as, in my estimation, the pinnacle of archtop guitar construction.
The thing that strikes me about Bob's work is that, well, the design is reminiscent of the great Renaissance. You know, I call him the Michelangelo of guitar, and I mean that sincerely. I mean, you look at his guitars, and it's something out of the Renaissance in terms of the quality and how he expresses it, but also the workmanship. When you look at these guitars, you can't find a flaw.
It was interesting in a number of ways because it was a very minimalist guitar in terms of the ornamentation, but it harkened back to the sort of violin making and the style that is in the Italian acoustic tradition that Bob I think would probably say that he is very heavily influenced by. But he's taken it to another degree. And that guitar is just marvelous to look at. It is absolutely beautiful. It became the signature emblem of the Blue Guitar exhibition. It's on books, posters, but it's also the favorite guitar of most of the players who've had a chance to play the blue guitars. And that is not in any way to take away from the other fine makers, many of whom are influenced heavily by Bob.
I do remember getting a phone call from Scott Chinery, who had explained to me that he wanted to have or create a blue guitar collection. Selectively pick guitar makers around the country to make their interpretation of a blue guitar, their best efforts, whatever that may be. The parameters were very simple. It had to be purely acoustic. It had to have a neck width at the nut of 1 7/8, and it had to be an 18-inch body. And we had to use a specific color blue. Scott supplied each maker with the information. There's actually a color number or a stock number from the Mohawk Finishing Company in New York State. That number was the designated blue color that everybody was supposed to use. It was an opportunity for me to stretch out a little bit. I had freedom to make the guitar any way I saw fit. It was kind of uncharted waters. When I changed the sound hole design, I had to also change the bracing and the graduations on the top and back in subtle ways.
I remember Scott remarking on its beauty, and he told me that he picked it up with great excitement. He wasn't sure whether a guitar as lovely as this guitar would be able to sound as good as the ultimate in archtop guitar that he was seeking. And he said it was an utter revelation to him when he strummed it, because he had already played a number of the blue guitars that had come in. And he was very happy with most all of them. He said this one was in another world, this was at another level. And he was absolutely ebullient with the Benedetto blue guitar. And from the moment he got it, felt that Bob had really achieved something special in its creation.
This guitar is the loudest, crispest archtop guitar you'll ever hear.
I remember we had an exhibition in Savannah, Georgia, with the Savannah School of Art and Design, where we had all the blue guitars available, and players from all over the country came and were anxious to compare the guitars. And again, we have some absolutely extraordinary makers, and the Benedetto blue guitar was the favorite of most everyone. So that is something I think will be a legacy not only for Scott as a collector, but first and foremost for Bob as a maker and the preeminent guitar maker of his generation.